A wonderful morning to everyone who has joined today. From ManageEngine family, we would like to extend our warm welcome and sincere thanks to all of our customers, partners, users who are interested in our solutions. Endpoint management and security is one of the main focus areas of ManageEngine. Let me introduce myself. My name is Bharani, and I'm a product specialist with ManageEngine for over 6 years. I take care of the endpoint management products, including Desktop Center. I'm a seasoned technical support engineer, assisting customers in their implementation, consultation, and troubleshooting in case of any challenges. Before we begin the training, here is the quick overview of the products offered by ManageEngine. As you can see, we offer a wide variety of products. This is to handle your endpoint management and security. Our products can be roughly categorized into endpoint management and security solutions. To know more about the products, please do visit the webpage mentioned below. So many things have changed during the course of last 9 months. We find ourselves struggling to cope up with the coronavirus pandemic that is wreaking havoc across the globe. As an organization, we have done our bit by completely adopting remote work. But as an individual, we need to contribute to stop this spread as well. Isolate yourself if you have symptoms and follow personal hygiene. As I said earlier, our organization has completely adopted remote work culture. This can be challenging for IT admins who now have to consider various tasks before initiating a patch task. Some of those factors are bandwidth constraint, keeping the end users informed about the patch task, time constraint while applying these patches, reboot schedule, and troubleshooting. Let us take a look on how we can include these factors and create a patch routine to suit the work from home scenario. Let's consider a live example to understand the work from home scenario better. It would be easier for us to correlate this example as we suggest multiple methods to manage and patch the endpoints remotely in the upcoming slides. John is one of our customers and heads the IT team of a successful chain of hotels. John and his team are in charge of managing over 10,000 endpoints spread across the globe. As we can see from the picture, each remote office comes with its own requirement in terms of number of endpoints managed, bandwidth, and the mode of connectivity. So the IT team now has to figure out ways to test the newly released patches, deploy them periodically to all the endpoints, and monitor those endpoints. On top of this, John is now faced with a new situation. That is, most of the employees are working from home. At the same time, some of the sectors have relieved with partial work from home resumption. Let's take a look at how John can handle both the situation with Desktop Central features. There are two types of users that John will have to face. Users who connect to the Desktop Central server via VPN and the users who connect over the internet. We will be discussing more about this in the upcoming slides. We will also be discussing about enabling, managing, and securing the work from home devices. As you can see, you can manage LAN, WAN devices, secure them by performing vulnerability and patch management. I once again welcome you all to the Desktop Central training program. In today's session, we will specifically be discussing on handling patch management with respect to work from home and back to office scenario with example stated with John's team as reference. Let's take a look at the overview of our training schedule. We are on week 1, which is patch management. This is one of the modules of our endpoint management and security suite. All these sessions will be recorded and made available in the below mentioned website, which is www.desktopcentral/training.html. All the registered participants will receive an email with the recorded training video. If you are interested in the upcoming training sessions, please do use the same link to register yourself. Your participation certificate includes Series 1, 2, and 3, and you can visit the below URL for more information. Back to Office. Now let's see how we are going to manage the missions which are back to Office. Here is the quick agenda for today. We will begin with basics about what Desktop Central is and how it can be used to achieve complete endpoint management. Following this, we will discuss about the effective ways in which you can manage your endpoints that are back to Office. We will also be discussing about the strategic planning in managing these endpoints, network access control, and concluding the session with most frequently asked questions with answers. During the last webinar, most of our customers have raised some valuable questions. We have collated those information and added them into our question session today, and I'm going to explain them in detail. During the training session, if you come across any questions, feel free to use the chat option to chat with our expert team. We will collect all the questions raised during the session, and they will be available for the larger audience. We will be using Desktop Central build version 10.0.621 for this presentation, and this application supports all the browsers. So here comes an important question. What is Desktop Central? Desktop Central is a unified endpoint management solution that ensures all your endpoints are secure, and it enables the users to use them effectively for business. A popular research analyst called Forrester defines UEM as follows: a product that provides a centralized policy engine for managing and securing employee laptops and mobile devices from a single console. And yes, Desktop Central is a unified endpoint management solution. In unified endpoint management, you can manage endpoints in a traditional IT management fashion. This includes patch management, application management, configuration deployment, OS deployment, tools for troubleshooting, and automate the day-to-day routine management activities. Similarly, endpoints can also be managed with modern management. All the modern operating system supports modern management. It features like geo-tracking, geofencing for your laptops, and distribute the store applications, profile distribution to enforce the restrictions, operating system reset, and recovery. Could you guess a popular operating system when I say modern operating system? Yes, it's Windows 10. Windows 10 is a classic example in which we can manage both traditional and modern management. So Desktop Central can manage both the worlds of traditional and modern from a single console. Hence, with the Desktop Central Unified Endpoint Management solution, you will be able to manage desktops, laptops, mobile phones, tablets, servers, point-of-sale devices, and browsers from a single console. Desktop Central is recognized for Best Unified Endpoint Management Tool of 2019 as reviewed by customers in Gartner Peer Insight. And this is for Customers' Choice Award. We are recognized for Unified Endpoint Management in Magic Quadrant for the second consecutive year, and we're also recognized for both traditional and modern management. And these are the features that you can leverage when you're using Desktop Central as a unified endpoint management solution. We have patch management, which takes care of operating system and third-party application patching. We have application management, asset management, and configurations. In fact, if you're going to follow our training schedule, we will talk more about this in our next sequence. You can manage other functions, including mobile device management for iOS, Android, Windows, and Chromebooks. And then we have modern management. This is for Windows and Mac machines. You can enable functions like geo-tracking, geo-fencing for your laptops, and you can also perform complete or corporate wipe. You can also put them on kiosk mode, distribute store applications, and manage profile distribution. And we also have OS deployment, where you will be able to create a single master image of any operating system and deploy it to multiple machines. Now, these are the features that are offered within the Unified Endpoint Management Desktop Central suite. Have you ever wondered what are all the components that are required to run Desktop Central application? So there are essential as well as optional components. The Desktop Central server is the central component that you will need to install. So it provides the interface to management console. The agent is also an essential component because you need to install the agent in all the missions that you're planning to manage. There is another component called the notification server. It is an interesting component which we will be discussing about once we get into the product. When we look at the optional components, we have distribution server, which serves as a repository for patches, software, scripts that you have deployed to machines in remote office. Then we have secure gateway server. So this is useful if you're planning to manage missions that are not a part of LAN or connecting over the internet. In case, if you want to have high availability, you can make use of our failover server, which is separately licensed. And moreover, you can also use the language pack to list the web console in your preferred language. Supported operating systems. So we support operating system platforms like Windows, Mac, and Linux for now. And the complete list is on the screen for you to verify. The application server runs on Windows platform, but you can manage the endpoints with Windows, Mac, or Linux operating systems. Agent installation. So Desktop Central is running on a client-server model, which means you need to have the agent installed in all the endpoints in order to manage them. So to facilitate agent installation, we recommend 3 methods. One is via group policy startup script in your Active Directory. So you can simply download the application setup and push it using a GPO policy. We do have automatic agent installation directly from the web console. So this will be by integrating your Active Directory domain with the Desktop Central. You can add multiple domains and choose the machines from those domains and push it to them. We do support a script-based agent deployment method. Alternatively, you can download the agent manually and execute the setup directly on the machine, and it should then report back to the server for managing. And we will be talking about agent installation in greater detail in our upcoming training sessions too. So if you're interested, please do subscribe to our upcoming training sessions. And now we are stepping into the core part of the webinar, which is patch management. So we offer support for 1,000+ applications in Desktop Central, and we also support 350+ third-party applications as well. So we have also added this information to a website which you can verify. So based on the use cases, a lot of customers had questions on which updates are required for operating system. So monthly rollups, security only updates, preview rollups, and the recent addition of extended security update for Windows 7 and Windows 2008 server operating system. Let us have a look at what these updates are. So as you know, security only updates. It's an update that has all the new security updates for the given month. And the major part over here is the cumulative and the feature pack update. And you must be aware of cumulative update, which includes both security and reliability updates that are packed together. So cumulative updates addresses new security issues and will proactively include updates that were released in the past. Feature pack management. As you all know, the latest service pack or the feature pack, which is currently on most of the Windows 10 machines, is the version 1909. So once a feature pack is released, the service or support will be available for 18 months, and using Desktop Central Unified Endpoint Management, you will be able to automate the feature pack deployment. So let's see the full patch approach recommended by Microsoft. So I'm going to provide more information on how Microsoft recommends patching for customers' environment. As you all know, second Tuesday of every month is considered to be the Patch Tuesday for Microsoft. During this time, Microsoft releases a lot of security and non-security updates. So most of the customers considers only the security updates, and they tend to ignore the non-security updates. As you can see from the image, this is how Microsoft tests and deploys the patches in their testing environment. Whereas this is how it's actually being deployed in customers' environment too. We would always recommend to give high priority to critical security updates. Post that, at least on the third week or fourth week, we recommend you to deploy all the required patches for that environment. This will ensure we are achieving the fully patched recommended state of Microsoft, and it also ensures that our environment is healthy. We will be talking more about the system health policy on the upcoming slides. Now, let us talk about the overview of the patch management architecture. So whenever a patch is released, it is made available in the vendor side. So our crawler team repeatedly probes the internet to draw the vulnerability information from the vendor side. So once the download is completed, the patches will be tested in our environment. So this testing involves whether the patches has been successfully installed, the compatibility check, and the applicability of the patches will be tested during this process. Then it will be published to the central repository server, which is our online patch database. So please be informed that we populate only the patch information like KB number, download URL, and the applicability logic of the patches which are released in the Microsoft baseline for the current month. So the Desktop Central server running in the customer's environment subscribes to the central patch repository to download the vulnerability database periodically. Once this process is completed, the client machine will be scanned in order to identify the missing patches. After identifying the missing patches, Desktop Central server would download the required patches from the vendor site, and the managed computers will collect the patches from the server and deploys them. However, you will have controls to define the deployment day and time. Now, let us take a look at how the endpoints can be managed, the work from home scenario. So we had mentioned on the example taken that there are two types of users that John would now have to cater to. Let's analyze them one by one. Firstly, we will take a look at the users who connect over the internet, or so-called the roaming users. There are two ways in which these users can be managed. One is through secure gateway server. So the domain users can connect to the secure gateway server. Thereby, you don't have to expose the desktop central server to the internet, and all the communication between the agent and the server occurs through the secure gateway server. So I'm going to take you to the web console of Desktop Central and show you how to configure the secure gateway server. So this is the console of the product. So to introduce the secure gateway based communication to Desktop Central, we need to modify the settings under admin and NAT settings. So we're going to add the FQDN of the secure gateway server against the public FQDN and the NAT device. So once the settings are configured, you need to navigate to admin and secure gateway server and download this exe and install the product in the demilitarized zone. So this will prevent the exposure of Desktop Central server directly to the internet by serving as an intermediate server between the WAN agents and the roaming agents. So by configuring this, we have now secured the communication between the Desktop Central server. So you can also view more information about this in the article which we have added to our website. So the second category of roaming users is via internet. So the roaming users who connect from work from home scenario. So most of the remote offices will have a distribution server to mediate the primary Desktop Central server and the agent. So usually the distribution server will be configured in the local network. Hence, exposing the distribution server is not a best practice. Instead, you will change the mode of communication for those remote offices. Let me explain you how to get this done from the web console. So you would have to navigate to admin, scope of management, and remote offices, where you can see the list of remote offices you have created. So some may be under direct communication and some may be under a distribution server. So to modify the communication for a roaming machine, you can modify the remote office details, and you can choose the communication type as through distribution server and vice versa. So by changing this communication, we can direct the machines connecting to the distribution server and the and the direct communication. Let me take you back to the presentation. The second type of users are the VPN users. So these users connect to the organization network through VPN. So the agent can now access the Desktop Central server with no problem. But since the entire workforce is now using VPN to reach the organization network on an unplanned patch deployment process, the entire VPN and the internet bandwidth might be completely used, resulting in bandwidth overhead, and even other business critical activities might get interrupted. We can solve this by carefully selecting the patches and excluding the bulky updates like feature pack and cumulative updates. Considering the work from home situation, we have now introduced a new feature called direct download. This is to conserve the bandwidth for the above mentioned VPN users. With this feature, the agents can directly download the patches from the internet without any dependency of the Desktop Central server. So the prerequisites to enable the direct download feature are: we need to ensure that you're running the latest version of Desktop Central build. You will have to deploy a simple configuration to enable the direct download feature for the VPN connected work from home machines. Now let me show you how to deploy this configuration from Desktop Central. So we're going to go back to the Desktop Central web console. So to deploy this configuration, please navigate to Threats and Patches, Deployment, Disable Automatic Updates, where you can see a list of configurations that can be used for disabling the automatic updates of vendors. So here you can see an option called Enable Agent to download the patches directly. So you need to create a configuration. So it's a simple registry change, which we're doing it here. So once this is added, you can fix the target to your endpoints and deploy it immediately. So once the configuration is deployed, the direct download feature will be enabled and the agent can directly download the patches from the vendor site without any dependency of the Desktop Central server. We have also added more information on enabling this in Windows and Mac machines also. So here is the template that we have captured. This is a screenshot. And these are the instructions that you need to follow for enabling the direct download in Windows and Mac machines. Please do contact our support team to get more details regarding this feature. Back to Office. So there are certain things that an administrator should look for when the machines are back to Office. Quarantining the non-compliant machines, updating the unpatched applications, and deploying feature packs if they're outdated. You wouldn't have deployed when the machines are roaming, as it is a big upgrade. Deploying updates based on users' availability. So we are going to discuss this situation one by one. Strategic patch management for back to office users. So we are going to discuss about the network access control. So previously, we have seen how to manage the endpoints during the work from home scenario. And now let's create a patch routine for back to office machines. The first objective will be enabling network access control for the non-compliant machines, identifying critical applications to patch so that it can be done in priority, create a system restore point for all the work from home endpoints. So when performing the challenges through patch deployment tasks or in any accidental situation, we are safe to restore the backup. So that is the objective of system restore point. And the next objective is to have the end users informed about the patching schedule so that they can be prepared. And then to test the newly released patches on a pilot group of machines before we deploy anything to bulk computers. So we test the patches to avoid any misbehavior that the patch might cause in the work environment. And we are going to approve the patches and deploy them to highly vulnerable systems. Finally, to generate reports for all the above mentioned activity. So let's take a look at them one by one. Network access control. So network access control is used to tighten the network security by restricting the endpoints that don't satisfy the compliance requirements of the organization. Network access control will allow the system administrator to allow, restrict the access to organization's network for the endpoints that fails to confirm the compliance settings that's fixed by the administrator. So please note that the network access control module is available in Desktop Central build version 10.0.595 and above. So if you look at the workflow, the admin creates a policy that defines the complaint status of the machines in his organization. So if a system is found to be non-compliant, that system's network resources are restricted or that system is said to be quarantined. The user can remedy the problem causing the non-complaints and recheck the status of the system manually. By default, the complaint status of all the systems are checked automatically during every refresh cycle. We will be discussing about refresh cycle in the upcoming slide. And also, the complaints status of unquarantined machines to which complaints policies have been deployed will be checked every time when there is an IP change. That is, whenever the machine is connected or disconnected from the network, the complaints is rechecked. So if the complaints has been achieved or if the agent has been uninstalled, the quarantine on those systems is revoked automatically. So let me show you how this can be done in Desktop Center. So I'm going to go back to the product console. We have also explained the step-by-step instructions on enabling this. I'm going to show you how this can be done. So here is the step-by-step instructions on how this can be achieved. So we are going to download an agent and we are going to extract it and run a quarantine policy generator tool. So it is an exe which provides you an interface where you can define your software checks, service checks, and the custom checks. So remember, the tool requires .NET 4.0 to be installed before you try this exe. So let me show you how this is going to look like. That's right. Here is the interface of the policy generator. So here, I'm going to define a policy. Let's say, if there is an application of 7-zip or any application, for example, and if that exists, I'm going to block all the network access. And also, once you start adding these details, by end of that, you'll be prompted with an option to automatically update the policies. So please ensure you're going with automatic update so you don't have to do anything manually. The tool will be taking care of all the automatic updates that you do here. So here what we are doing is we are adding a software check and a service check. So you go to the services, you find the list of services that is running, and you can decide whether that service should exist or not exist. Or even if it is running or not running, you can define if that machine has to be quarantined or you need to allow that particular machine to access the VPN. And this can also be notified to the end user with a notification message as well. So the custom checks would also be done here, whereas you could do a registry check and you can add your custom tag, custom path. So we are going to define a baseline of what should be in the machine or what should not be in the machine. So if we are clear about what should not be in the machine, then we can add those details here. So based on this, the tool would automatically quarantine those applications. So once the details are added, we can generate a policy. Oops. So I've already generated a policy. So the policy generated will be available as a JSON file. So it has to be added as a JSON file. And once the policy file is generated, we need to deploy that using the script configuration. So let me show you how that can be done. So as you see in the instructions here, we need to add the script. So it should be added as a JSON file and the format should be quarantine.json. So once this is saved, then we need to add that into the Desktop Central Server repository with the specific file name, and we need to deploy it to the endpoints. So I'm going to show you how that can be done. So go to configurations. And custom script. So based on computers. So if you see, I've already added the configuration that it should deploy. So I'm going to use the status tester and the deploy exe as well. So there is also an option where you can revoke the quarantine status. So let's go with this one by one. So in case if the machine is found to be non-compliant, then the machine's network communication will be restricted. Now the best part is the system administrator will set the communication restrictions by choosing whether the machine should allow or restrict the access to the internet or the intranet. So we will decide all of this into the module that we have seen. And once we deploy this, the remark section of the deployment, when you do the script configuration, it will list down whether the machine is quarantined or not. We can also use the same policy to disable that as well. And to know the quarantine status of the managed endpoints, you see we have added an executable here, which is status tester.exe. So we need to add this to the desktop central server repository and create a configuration with the script and deploy it to the managed endpoints. So here I have already added that, but in case if you would like to create a new one, go to create and go to add script and browse for the files. So if you have extracted the tool details, you can see the uninstaller.exe, deployer.exe, and the tester.exe. So once this is added to your script repository, you can deploy it to your endpoints and the results would appear in the remark section. So this is how we can tighten the security of the endpoints through network access control. Trust this helps, and if you need more information about network access control, please do reach out to the support team where we will be able to explain this better. Let's go back to the presentation. So here is the screenshot of how the tool would look like, and this is the pop-up I was referring to. So if you want to generate a deployable zip with the policy, then please go with yes, so the details would be automatically added. Now we are going to create system restore points for back to office missions. So the importance is that, in case if you're doing any patch task, then the backup would help us to recover the mission. So let me show you how to enable the system restore for the endpoints. So here, I'm going to log in as Jonathan, who is the administrator for the account. As you can see, I'm using Desktop Central here, and I can directly navigate to Configurations, Script Repository, Templates, and you can search for System Restore. Okay, so you can see the enable system restore script here, which you need to add it to the repository. Since I've already added it, I can view it directly in the repository section. So from here, I would have to create a configuration to my computers, and I will just choose the target and deploy it to the endpoints. So by this way, I'm adding the system restore for the endpoints. Now the second objective is to inform the end users about the patching task, for which we need to navigate to Tools, Announcement, create an announcement. So add a title, add a message in detail about the task that you're going to perform on the end user's mission. You can define the start time of the announcement as well as the end time, and you would specify the frequency. You can target a group of users or a single user, and you can deploy it. So by this way, we can keep the end users informed that we're going to do some patch tasks on their missions. Now, do you remember, as per the other requirements, John have to identify the critical applications and prioritize it? So we are also going to discuss about that as well. So at first, John would have to verify the proxy settings in the product, for which you need to navigate to Admin and define the proxy settings. So you might wonder why I want to configure a proxy. The main reason for is to configure the proxy is to ensure that the desktop central server is allowed to connect to the central patch repository to update the vulnerability database, as well as to download the patches from the vendor site. I would also recommend to whitelist the URL, which is patchdb.manageengine.com. So this is where the patch repository is hosted. Please ensure the patch repository is accessible from the desktop central server so that it can download the information from the online patch database. Then John would have to verify the patch database settings to ensure the scheduled patch database update. So let me take you through that. So you would have to go to admin and you would have to go to patch database settings. So this is where you will define what updates are needed for your environment. So we have categorized the Microsoft updates and third-party, driver, and BIOS. So as you know, we are supporting my network and sound and video drivers. And for BIOS, we are doing it for Dell BIOS for now. So you can define what is needed for your environment. So I'm going to choose the security rollups or service packs, non-security updates, and the definition updates based on the requirement. And this is where you would schedule at what time the synchronization should get done. So as mentioned before, the central patch repository gets updated periodically with the details of the latest patches that are released by the vendors. And this sync happens once in a day. Here is where you define at what time the synchronization has to be done. Now, I'm also going to explain you how to test the patches because as per the agenda, we need to define the critical patches, the priority patches. We need to identify them and patch it to the endpoints. But before you do any sort of actions in terms of patching, we need to ensure that the patches are tested and approved. So I'm going to show you how to test the critical patches and plan for deploying in the production environment. So it all starts with a small approval tag for each patches. So when you go to threads and patches and go to patches, you will find the list of missing patches, whatever is needed for your environment. So every patch has an approval status. Either it is approved or not approved. And this settings is under deployment, test and approve. So there are two modes of approval here. One is automatic approval and the other one is test and approval. So if you would like to test your patches first and then deploy it to the production environment, you would be given option here to create your own test environment. So first, you need to define the platform and the group of missions. So when I say custom group, we have an option to group the missions based on the requirement. So for example, I want to create a group for my IT admins. Then I can just name the group and I would also go and choose the respective missions and save it here. So once the missions are added, I can use this group for deploying patches or generating reports. As you can see, there are three different types of groups that you can create. One is static, so the addition or removal will be done manually. The other one is dynamic. So as the name says, I can group the missions based on any of this criteria, like Windows 10 or Windows 8.1. So I could use that criteria to group the missions. And static unique. So when the mission is a part of any of the unique groups that we are going to create, it cannot be a part of any other static unique groups. By this way, we're ensuring that that particular mission is managed in only one unique group. So once these groups are created, then I'm going to apply my pilot group or the IT admin group here for testing. Let's say I'm going to use this test missions. And here the objective is to conquer or define only the critical patches. So I'm going to choose the critical updates that I'm going to plan for patching. So we'll define the security updates here. It can be application specific as well, or you could also exclude a specific application from patching it. And the same goes with third party and the driver updates. So once the criteria is defined, you need to apply a deployment policy. So we will be discussing about the deployment policy in the upcoming slide. But for now, I'm going to choose a default policy to deploy it immediately. Now we have the group ready and we have decided what to test and when to test. So after the deployment is done, the patches, if they are successfully deployed in all the endpoints without any failure, then the patches can be automatically marked as approved after the number of days you specify here. Which means, for example, it's Patch Tuesday today, and once the updates are done, once the patches are deployed, and once the deployment is successful on the test machines, exactly after 1 or 2 days of time, the patches would get approved automatically. So by this way, we are testing and approving the patches. So now when I go back to the patches view to find the approval status, so I can certainly understand that the approved patches are all tested and approved. This will be the testing method. Now the next objective is to automate the patch deployment. So now that the testing is done, to capture this approved updates and deploy to the production environment, the tool has a mechanism called automate patch deployment, where only the approved patches will be captured and we are going to deploy it to a group of missions. So let me show you how this can be done. So all you have to do is go to threads and patches, deployment, automate patch deployment, and create an automate patch task. So once this is created, you can define the criteria here. So let's say I want to automatically deploy all the security updates that are approved, and that's specifically for all the applications. And I'm also going to choose it the same for third party. And we have antivirus definition updates as well. So we're supporting Windows Defender and McAfee, Microsoft Security Essentials that you can automatically deploy. But we generally recommend to create a new task because the release of antivirus updates are very frequent. And you can also enable the driver updates into your automatic policy as well. Now this is where you can set up another criteria, whereas let's say a patch is released today, but you want to deploy this patches only after 10 days from release, then you could use that criteria here. Or from the day you approve the patch, let's say after a week of time, when I approved it, I would like to deploy that patch, I can also fix that criteria as well. And deployment policy. As I said, the deployment policy defines how and when the deployment should be done. So I'll be explaining that separately, but I have associated one of the deployment policy here. So once it is added, I can fix the target. So the target can be the branch offices that we have created, or it can be a domain, or it can be OUs, or the AD groups that you would like to target, and it can be filtered based on the number of groups as well. So once it is targeted, you could configure the notifications. So in case of any download or deployment failure, if you want to be notified every 8 hours or 6 hours with a detailed report, you can configure it. So if you see here, the attachment can be a PDF, CSV, or an XLS file. So this is how you test your patches, approve it, and deploy it automatically to the production environment. And please feel free to ask any questions as we have a dedicated chat team. So let's go back to the presentation for the next topics. Feature pack deployment. So when the machines were out of the network, you wouldn't have planned for a feature pack upgrade. As you all know, it's a major upgrade for the operating system. So though you have an option to do it, the machines which are working from home, they wouldn't have had a stable connection. And now that they are back to office, we can very well plan for such big upgrade. So as you know, the latest update released by Microsoft is 2004, and you can also directly upgrade from the older versions to the latest one using Desktop Center. We have automated the process for professional edition, and for enterprise, we need to get the ISO from volume licensing, which is what Microsoft recommends. And we have added the step-by-step instruction for feature pack deployment for all the versions in our website. Please do reach out to the chat team so we will be able to share the link to follow the process. Deployment based on users availability. So let me explain this. So the objective here is that we need to plan the patch deployment based on the endpoints availability. So to understand the history of logged in and logged off status of each endpoints, we have created a query here, which I'm going to show you as an example. So the main purpose is that let's decide when a group of machines are logged in and logged off, and we're going to allocate a dedicated deployment policy at that point of time. Because if there is any discrepancy, for example, the machines are logged in and logged off between 9 and 6, and the policy has been configured after 6 p.m. So the machines are down and they're somewhere outside the network, so you may not be able to achieve the complaints. So it is important you understand the user's availability and plan for the patch deployment. So I've also worked on a query, or there are default reports that is available in Desktop Central. So when you go to reports in Desktop Central, you have an option called Power Management Report, where you can see the system uptime report. So these are the details that will be available. So with the query, I've added the remote office and the domain details as well. So you can also reach out to the team to know this query. So this will display the computer name, the domain name, and the username who has logged in, and the remote office to which it belongs to, what is its logged on time and logged off time. And you can export this into a report to understand the behavior of the machines. And the best part is this export can be used for creating custom groups in Desktop Center. So once this is exported, you can go to admin and you can go to custom group and create a custom group. So once the custom group is created, you have an option here to import it in a form of CSV file. So you can upload it into a CSV file. So that users who are logged in between 9 to 6 will be created as a group, and you can plan for the patch deployment based on that. As I said, the deployment policy in Desktop Central will allow you to define the deployment window, which I'll be explaining. So this is the main reason why we need to understand the availability based on the users. Patch, DB sync, and scanning process. Based on the schedule, the Desktop Central server will reach out to the online patch database to collect the latest vulnerability information. So once the sync process is completed, any machine from John's IT environment, which is reaching out to the Desktop Central server as per the 90 minutes policy, will be performed a patch scan automatically. So as you can see, right from the sync and scan, both of these tasks has been automated. And all you need to do is just configure a patch database setting and ensure everything will be taken care of. So John has a few more requirements while creating configurations. You need to allow the users to skip the deployment, and force the deployment might interrupt the end user's work. So he has decided to skip the deployment. And users with reboot policy. Similarly, he would also like to give an option for the end users to decide the reboot or when it should be done. So I'm going to show you how the deployment policy can be configured. So go to the product console and you have an option called threats and patches, and go to deployment, and deployment policy. So here is where you create a new policy. Now it includes 4 parameters. One is the deployment schedule. So you will decide the day and week. For example, I want to test my patches on a second Saturday or Sunday. So I can fix the preferred day and week for deployment. And I would also choose the deployment window to be added, meaning I would like to test it only on a non-business hour. So that's after 6 o'clock to 11 o'clock, for example. So remember, during this deployment window, the patches are downloaded and the client machines would collect it from the server and deploy it. So in case, if you would like to pre-download the patches, meaning you can download the patches and store it in a location, and when the agent has to deploy it during this window, then you can go to the pre-deployment settings and enable the downloading patches during subsequent refresh cycle. So we'll also be explaining the refresh cycle later. Now, we can also automatically wake up the computers before deployment and notify the users. So this is what John would now have to achieve it, because he can configure the user notification messages, and you can also allow the users to skip the deployment as well. They may be doing some important work, but at the same time, you cannot allow the end user to keep skipping a critical patch deployment, because it might make your machine vulnerable. So you can force the deployment after 2 days or 3 days of time. And reboot policy. So once the deployment is done, as you know, some of the patches may require a reboot. So we have 2 options here. One is do not reboot or shut down. So if it is their critical servers and if it's a business hour, you don't want to reboot the machine, and you go with do not reboot or shut down. If you have decided to reboot, you still have options to customize it. One is you can force the reboot immediately, or you can force the reboot at a specific reboot time. That is, I want to reboot on Sunday between 6 o'clock to 7 o'clock. You can fix the timing, and you can allow the users to postpone the reboot as well. So this would allow the end user to decide when the reboot should occur. So he can skip it for 1 hour, 2 hours to 8 hours. And when user defined time is selected, he or she can choose the time at when the reboot should happen. So this 4 parameters is what we call as a deployment policy, and you can create n number of policies like this, because you have different group of machines with different deployment time and date. So you can define that here. So every configuration you create, it is associated to a deployment policy. So once this is defined, you can apply to any configuration. Let's go back to the presentation and see some of the screenshots of how the deployment policy pop-up would appear. So this pop-up is for allowing the users to skip the reboot. So if you see here, the drop-down will give the end user an option to remind in 1 hour, 2 hours, 6 hours, whatever the IT admin have chosen it in the policy. And similarly, he can skip the reboot as well. So you can do it on a specific point of time. So when the user defined time is chosen on the policy by the admin, the end user himself can choose the date and time when the reboot should occur. So deploying between 6 and 9 p.m. is one of the criteria, and wake on and deploy. So we have a wake on LAN and deployment policy as we discussed, and we also have an option to force the reboot excluding the servers. So you would have seen this option here, but let me revisit that once. So if you go to the deployment policy, you can specifically declare it for servers. If you see here, exclude the servers. We understand the importance of servers because there may be some critical applications running. So if you want to exclude the servers by default, you could go with this configuration as well. So these are the options that is available in the deployment policy. So this is for the force reboot, where the end user will get a pop-up with a timeout interval where he can decide to reboot it immediately. Now let's talk about automate patch deployment. So as we discussed before in the example, after the testing of patches is done, we should focus on deploying those patches automatically to the rest of the production servers. So the automated patch deployment calls for an automated scan as soon as the server synchronizes with the patch database. The missing patches are detected on each of the machine in accordance with the next refresh cycle after the patch sync is completed. So the patches are then downloaded onto the server from the vendor side and deployed it automatically as specified in the deployment window. So once the deployment is done, the status is then removed to the server and it is reported. So the whole process aims at eliminating the manual efforts. We can revisit the automated patch deployment once. So we can go to threads and patches. So we can go to deployment and you go to automate patch deployment. So you can create it based on the operating systems here. If you have Windows and Mac machines, you can create it based on the operating systems. So the first is to choose the application. So you would define the criteria and you would fix the deployment policy that we discussed now, because any configuration we create is associated with the deployment policy, which helps us to fix the preferred week and day for deployment along with the window. And we will be defining the target, which can be a domain or OU or a group. And finally, we would also configure the notifications in case of any download or deployment failure. So this is how the automation can be done, and you can create a number of automated tasks like this. So this is how the automated patch deployment works. Patch management as a class. It is independent of WSS, Desktop Central, and it's a cross-platform patch management application which supports Windows, Mac, Linux, and a list of third-party applications. We can leverage various features of test and approve, an automated patch deployment task with flexible deployment policies, so that suits the organization need. So we could easily tweak the features to suit the patch management requirement and utilize the filters to collect the reports based on audit requirements as well. So this is the overview of the patch management module, and we are going to end this with configuring some of the reports. So let me show you how to generate the reports. So there are predefined reports and scheduled report. Let's say I want to immediately generate some of the report. So I go to patches. So I see 29 missing patches. Let's say I want to know how many critical patches are missing. I can use this filter, apply it. You can also save the filter for future use. So it lists down the security patches or the severity of critical patches, and I can export it into a PDF or a CSV format. It's very simple. So you can see this filters choose option or column chooser or export option in most of the pages, or you can see it in all the tabs. And for scheduling it, you go to reports and then you go to schedule report, add a schedule report. So you can see the patch report here where you can define the criteria. Let's say I want to know the list of installed patches for a specific group of machines. I can also use the filter here. So I'm looking for a specific operating system or a group, for example. I can just fix that, and then you see the list of custom groups here and patch type, group, or branch officers. So you can fix a lot of criteria here, and you can choose in which format you need the reports to be sent, whether as an attachment or a zipped file. Configure the email and enable the scheduler. So if I need the same report every week on a Monday morning, so I can schedule it here. So this is how the reporting can be done. Not only based on patches, and it can be done on health status of the machine, scan report of the machine. As we discussed, user logon report can also be automated. So all of these available reports can be automated through the reporting section. Desktop Central architecture. So this is mainly for the benefit of the attendees who are not familiar with the product. So if you see, Desktop Central is an on-prem solution and supports client-server model application. You can have Desktop Central Server hosted in any of the supported Windows operating system. So the architecture talks about how you can manage the computers in your local area network and wide area network. So when it comes to wide area network, you can manage the endpoints from different remote offices. So this can be done from a single console. So they can connect either over internet or using a VPN or MPLS connection. For the machines that are present in remote site, which are connected over a direct internet connection, you can use a component called a secure gateway server. So this would bridge the agent traffic to the desktop central server securely when they connect over the internet. And when it comes to remote locations, we have a component called distribution server, which is used to throttle the bandwidth for data traffic. And this will be done between the desktop central server and the remote location. So we will also talk about this in details once we get into the further training schedules. So you will also be able to manage your mobile devices using secure gateway server as well. And this will also be discussed in the further training sessions. So here comes an important question. Is Desktop Central capable of managing machines in closed network? So yes, even in a closed network architecture, the Desktop Central can perform patching. So in this case, we need to nominate a machine which has internet connection to download the patches from the vendor site, and then you shall copy those patches to the Desktop Central server manually. So by this way, you will still be able to manage the computers in the closed network. So in case if you're looking to host the Desktop Central in the cloud server, you can make use of AWS or Azure. At the same time, we also have introduced the Desktop Central in cloud as well. So Desktop Central is available in AWS and Azure. And the best part of hosting the application in cloud, as you know, it is all cost effective. And once the Desktop Central server is hosted on cloud, it can be used to manage endpoints directly or through a distribution server. If you require patch management as a separate product, then we have a standalone tool called Patch Manager Plus, which is available in both on-prem and cloud edition. Now let's take a quick look at the ports that are used by Desktop Central. So Desktop Central runs primarily on two ports, 8383, which is HTTPS, or 8020, which is HTTP. So all the agents talk to the server using this port. There is another port, which is 8027, which is a notification server. So notification server uses the port 8027 to perform all the on-demand activities like initiating a patch scan, remote control, etc. So the 90 minutes refresh policy. So the 90 minutes policy, let me explicit this in simple terms. So the agent of Desktop Central would reach out to the Desktop Central server once in 90 minutes. So by this way, the Desktop Central agent can verify if there are any new tasks allocated for the agent. So this feature ensures that all the computers in the network can contact the server periodically. So there are two important factors ensured here. A network is not choked by the agent-server communication, meaning bandwidth is not disturbed due to the agent-server communication. The performance of the server is also not affected at any time. Also, the desktop central server has the intelligence to endure systematic streamlined communication from all the agents at regular intervals. Vulnerability management. So desktop central agent scans all the Windows operating systems and third-party applications installed in your Windows system and servers for software vulnerabilities and misconfigurations, and it will allow you to mitigate those vulnerabilities as well. We support mitigating the unknown vulnerabilities like zero-day vulnerabilities by deploying scripts that enforces secure configurations. So let's see what vulnerability management is offering us. So a vulnerability assessment is the process of identifying, evaluating, and classifying security vulnerabilities based on the risk they present to your enterprise. So we need to narrow down the most threatening one for timely risk reduction. In this section, the tool will spot all the OS vulnerabilities, third-party vulnerabilities, zero-day vulnerabilities. So this is to prioritize the vulnerability based on severity, age, exploit code. So this will ensure that there is a timely risk reduction. So I'm also going to explain this on the web console here. So go to threats and patches, and then go to threats, and go to security misconfigurations. So the security configuration baselines are derived from industry standards and best practices. So you will see an elaborate description and resolution for each configuration. So you can also push the resolution right from here to all the affected machines. High-risk softwares. So applications which are expired will not receive a security update from vendors. So which makes them extremely vulnerable. So you can find those applications in your environment and uninstall them from the console. It also detects P2P RDP softwares as well. And web server misconfiguration. So the Vulnerability Manager Plus supports web server hardening for widely deployed web server vendors like Apache, Tomcat, Nginx. So you can view the impact and remediation for each server misconfiguration. So by applying any such configurations, we are ensuring that the server is against brute force attacks, session hijacking, source code disclosure, etc. Port audit. So you can also monitor the ports which are in use and the processes running into it. So this will help you to identify the unintended ports. Let's go back to the presentation. So these are the screenshots of how the details would be displayed in the software vulnerability section with CVE score. Now let's discuss some of the real-time scenarios and solutions. Do I need a secure gateway server for patching machines and working from home? Yes. If the machines are not in VPN, we need to configure a secure gateway server to securely manage the patch management for those endpoints. Local office machines are now at work from home. How do I make them contact the desktop central server? So as we discussed, if a machine is not in VPN, we need to configure a secure gateway server which establishes a communication to the desktop central server. So if they're connected via VPN, it will communicate to the central server or the distribution server without the need of secure gateway server. So by this way, we can manage those machines. Is it a good practice to expose your distribution server? No, it is not. Since you have installed the distribution server in your local network, it is not recommended to expose the distribution server or the desktop central primary server. Is there a way for desktop central to download all the necessary patches, then restart once for the end users? Yes, The agent will scan for the missing patches, deploy them based on the schedule, and checks for reboot. Once all the patches are deployed based on the schedule you have allocated, and then it executes a reboot as per the policy defined. So it's one reboot for after all the patches are deployed. So when I exclude or decline a patch, is this removed from the patch management dashboard? Yes, when you decline a patch, it will not be calculated as missing. Let me show you how to decline a patch, because there are two options in here. There is selective exclusion and permanent exclusion. So we'll go back to the web console here to show you how this can be achieved. Let's say, for example, I'm automating a patch deployment. Okay. So in this case, I would like to exclude some of the applications for this particular task. So here I can fix the patch type, and from the application I can choose all the application except. So by this way, I'm excluding the .NET Framework applications in this task. So this is selective exclusion. What if I have to permanently exclude this or decline this? So I would have to go to threats and patches, and patches, decline patches, select a group and decline the patches. So here you would target the custom group to which you would like to decline the patches for. And remember, the declining of patches can be done based on KB numbers, patch ID, and we also have options to do it based on application, platform, and family as well. So this is how selective exclusion and permanent exclusion is achieved. Our business applications misbehave occasionally, and I suspect that recent patch deployments could be the cause. How can I roll back a patch? That's a good question. So Desktop Central support rollback for the Microsoft updates. For every patch, we have updated whether the uninstallation is supported or not. So you can verify those status in the missing patches section. And if it is supported, you can select the patches and uninstall it from one or a group of machines at the same time. While deploying the patches, I came across some of the errors on multiple clients. How to get this fixed? So these error codes that you're seeing could be due to multiple reasons, and file corruption is one among them. So we have detailed troubleshooting article in the product console which helps you to overcome this situation. And even after following the troubleshooter guide, if you're still facing any issues, then you can very well reach out to the support team for further assistance. How do I take a patch status report for a specific group of missions before and after patch Tuesday? So let me show you how this can be achieved from the product console. So same, you go to threats and patches, patches and missing patches. So this displays the list of patches that's missing in my network. So here I can use a filter. Let's say I want to know the critical patches for a group of mission. We have an option to filter it based on custom groups or domain name. So let's take group as an example. And I will need this report based on the release date. So that is also added as a filter here. So you can add it before date or after the patch Tuesday date, or it can be for last 30 days or before 30 days. So a lot of filter options are available. So you need to define the options in the filter and apply it here in the section. So it generates a report, and based on that, you can also export it into a PDF or a CSV format. At the same time, these reports can also be automated as you are aware. So moving on to the questions that we have collated. How can I patch my Windows 10 machine in BYOD setup? So firstly, we need the essential components, which is Desktop Central Agent. So once the agent is installed, we will now decide whether this machine will be using VPN or not. So as you know, if it's not, it's going to be connected over the secure gateway server that you have configured. How soon are the patches available to me after being released by Microsoft? So as soon as the patches are released, our team will start testing the process to add the checksum values, detection logics, etc. So once the testing is done, the patches will be released in our database, and you can expect the security updates within 12 hours and the rest of the updates within 24 hours of time. Can we ever reach a green state in patch management? Yes, we can. I hope you remember the full patch Microsoft approach, which we discussed in the beginning. So it's about deploying the security and critical patches first, and the rest of the updates in the following weeks. I could see a difference in patches discovered by Desktop Central against WSS or Windows updates. Why? Yes, in case of Windows 7 or 8.1 or Server 2008 or Server 2012 machines, the Windows updates does not show up the security only updates as missing. But Desktop Central detects all such updates as missing to ensure they are updated. And WSS detects update only from its source, but Desktop Central detects patches from other sources such as Windows Update, Microsoft Catalog, and WSS. So you might see this discrepancy with WSS. How are failed patches handled in test and approve? So the main reason why we are testing the patches is to see if it's causing any issues or failures in our test machines. If we have selected the automatic approval of patches after testing, remember, patches that are successfully installed in at least one of the machine and have not failed in any of the machine will only be approved. So if there is a failure in test groups, it's important we focus on resolving it based on the troubleshooting article we provide, because the same might occur for our production machines as well. If we are able to find the root cause in test machines and stop them, we can stop such issues happening in our production environment. Is there a way to disable the automatic updates of third-party applications like Adobe, Java, etc.? Yes, you can. We can disable the automatic updates for third-party applications by deploying a simple configuration. So if you look at the web console here, you need to get into the threads and patches section, deployment, and go to disable automatic updates, where you can see a list of configurations, and you can create one of the configuration for the application and choose the target and deploy it immediately. So this configuration will ensure the automatic updates are disabled for that application. Moving on to the next question. How can I see what are the patches released in this Patch Tuesday cycle and see all the missing systems? So we can verify this information in the patches section. So you need to get into the threads and patches section, go to patches and go to latest patches, where you can see the list of latest patches that are released. So if you would like to filter them based on a release date, you could also use this filter and choose the release date or the vendor or any other criteria and filter them to view the details. And if you go to the missing system, the same can be captured, and it also lists down the missing systems as well. Some patches have the description of reboot may require. Why is this? So let's say you're installing a security update, which updates the DLL that has loaded in one or more process that's required by Windows. The security update cannot be completed when the DLL is loaded in the client machine. So only after restarting the machine or during the system startup, these patches would get deployed. So for those updates, we have added the status as may require. So here comes the end of today's patch management webinar. I would like to thank every one of you for joining the webinar on your busy schedule. You can very well rate us on a scale from 1 to 5, where 5 is the best. You can also spread the word about this webinar as well as about Desktop Central Unified Endpoint Management Solution in any of the below platforms. So the next training will be for software deployment, which is scheduled for October 21st. And you can also register for the same using the link we have provided. So if you're in need of a personalized demo about the product, you should inform the chat team experts so that they can help you organize it. Thank you all for taking your valuable time and participating in our webinar. Have a great day.